Gynultíis wúchin chasatí Johan Ḳéex échat yatee has to ánigh cá has to ánigh kadán ʼatudli.átk would to dashooch sa at hinde would to art ya tlachlikudzi adátx'i yutachotang llutsin was a aqahas quwishian ye awe one qanins qaqtaqach hatu wasagu hatlagu qankian yach ye qaqachtustíí aqadat yutachotan Tlel has du ḳusteeyí has wdudlitóow Tí latóowu. But latóowu hatun tani ya has to tunda tani ya ha yuqatangi has to yuqatangi ya ye awe ade ye qatanuk ye latóowu we yidati ya qatlagudach ya wujin ye awe gash chu ya we qa shkatisit ya dushachawu ye awe uhan hatlagu kwankian hachagu qagu yidati ye awe kagachtusid gwalye aqa tik kagachtusatik ya haqusteeyí ye awe dat yutachotangiayagi wasa sa atihin itut ye khoji itut awe awa us aqa awe hatundatani qunakh kegurlatsin we se atihin tak gulchish ya ʼéeití tlingit da ye jagachtuné ya dagun wujit well tlel wujit yuqatang dagun we yuqatang we an qakil walshkalni gadach just uski hajiwu da ye jagachtuné dasa atu yeti da diachsa tlesai qudzati verb mode da qasa qa achtuasagu khosaku aqa hasi yuqatangi da ye jaqone gwal wan qanins qaqt kaqshikit de khatna o yin qaqone guksa we qaqshihidi Gynultíis a chéadí sa achiaigi. Has tú we adátx'i has tú íchwalla tú tlingit yag ya shkalnig wasa du asa dach dasegu at qudzati yi anika aqa zisk khallak ach yel chag T'aawáḳ tikitgiya dasa has sakuya eti uski we adátx'i gwal Cajun we has to katagu we klach uski ade we gwal gushaka we jin kat has to katagu aqa dasa tsuya eti tsachwil tsagedi ya has to sai achtuasagu has awas ku ka ade Cajint dus tuye Gleich dech nos da hun Cajun at gai si clay wooshtin ye awe ach tlich eet wa ach you do a sac Gynultíis you to a guess a good thing get inach yu reatani that kekwak was classy to ashku gone da ye jagachtuni yeah. Should we recap? What was I talking about?
I had a question that popped into my mind as you were speaking.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we could get on from the recordings and get the files that we need to put what you're speaking into Elon so we can so specifically me could go through and actually figure out what you're actually saying?
Yes, so that's a great idea. Um, there's a couple ways we could do that. Uh, maybe what I'll do is I'll put a link. I kind of built our class page last week, and I was looking at it tonight, and they're like, "Well, I left some things on from last year," and so I got to do some rearranging. But what I'll do is I'll put a link sort of towards the top has a whole bunch of information, like all the text you need, and you start getting down to the good stuff after a few like swipes or scrolls or whatever you do. But what I'll do is I'll put the link to the actual Zoom folder on there. So what I do is when we're done with the class is I upload it to YouTube and then I put the link on there and then I store them in a Zoom folder, which I'm sure the IT folks are probably gonna want to talk to me at some point because uh, we be terabyting these days. And so I am gobbling up a lot of storage space. But isn't it like infinite? I don't know. Anyways, and so you could use those videos. So one of the difficulties is they are 1080p, so they do take up a lot of space. Uh, but there might be ways that we sort of isolate the beginnings of those. I don't know if I really have time, but if anybody's a film editor out there, another way, and just so you folks know that this is an option.
Kune, I
Ah,
thought with recordings, there's usually the video file, which, like you say, is huge, but then usually there's like a MP3 file that just has the audio in it.
there is, but I usually don't do any. I don't usually migrate those over. I just let them archive in a different cloud. But that's a possibility too. Um,
Well, and if we cut off, the last hour and however much of class where we're teaching, I mean, I don't need to translate this right now. I already understand it.
yeah, I mean, it could be a fun exercise though to go back through some of these and just to listen to them and to be able to
Right.
write them down. It's a good practice because like you folks have been listening to me talk for a long time now. And so I think it there's a level of familiarity there that I think is important. And then coming in and saying like, because then you'll probably be able to be like, oh, he should have used a low tone right there. Jeez. But um, I do think it's a good exercise. And let's say you found a video, and we're just talking about language videos. I'm not going to tell you what you should be doing with like copywritten content or whatever. But for example, let's say you look at some of these old celebration videos and you're like, oh, there's this really awesome speech right on this part. And I just want to work on it. That's all you're trying to do is work on it. There are some programs out there. One of them is this, it's a good program, but it's also one that tries to sell you a whole bunch of other things. It's like, if you like this one, buy our other 50 things and let us remind you 17,000 times. But it's called Wondershare Uniconverter. Uh, Wondershare Uniconverter. I don't know how you say it. And that allows you to convert video files and you could lower the resolution of it. So and let's say you recorded an elder and you recorded them in 1080p or 4K because you got some nice camera. And then you start working on it, you're like, this file is gigantic. It's like slowing my computer down. You could drop that to 480 resolution because really in Elon, the thing is just this little chunk of the window, right? So you don't need a super high resolution video. And so I'm sure there's other methods that are out there, but it also allows you to download videos from most places where you can just enter the web link and it'll just download it for you. And it'll let you pick the resolution that you want. And that's actually how I build a lot of my Elon files is I'll record somebody and then I'll put it up onto YouTube. And then I'll bring it down off of YouTube and convert it to a smaller video at the same time. And I'm sure there's other ways to do it. I'm not really a videographer, but that's one method that I've used because I like to talk to you folks about stuff, and it's usually just stuff I think about when class starts. And sometimes I've got an idea before I head to class, but usually I'm like, oh yeah, and then it's like one thought leads to another. So I'm in Ḳéex. That's what I was talking about. I'm teaching kids, and I kept asking them what animals they knew, and it was fun. They know the names of a bunch of Tlingit animals now, and so it's been a lot of fun. And then what would the I said ade kejint dus tu yeah. What would that be? Ade kejint dus tu yeah.
How to count to 5?
Yes. How to count to 5. So there's a couple things. One is the number gets the letter T on there to like arrive at. And we go from dutu to dus2. So the S classifier in that means you're counting to a specific number, which is pretty cool. You'll never run out of verbs in Tlingit. Like, you'll never be sitting there and be like, wish we had a few more verbs, man. Like, you'll just never run out. You'll just never, ever run out. Okay, any other thoughts or questions?
So this was something I actually did like over the break, was because these are on YouTube, and YouTube has a thing where you can slow it down. I mean, go back and forth.
Yes, I love that.
So anyway, so skipping a line and all that.
Yeah, because you don't
It's a hack.
you don't necessarily need Elon there because you're not gonna. I don't think you're gonna publish the book of ʼusteeyí class openings, right? Like we need more dad jokes, right? And so, but I think it's a good exercise to sometimes go back because I do this as well. I'll go listen to elders that I recorded, and what's interesting is like, yes, I was there, I was listening, but when I hear that exact same thing a second time or a third time, I'm like, whoa, I'm catching all this other stuff that I didn't even realize I had missed. And so, and sometimes I've recorded stuff and I've gone back and listened to it, and I'm like, okay, I had an idea what they were talking about, but now I'm like, wow, that's really neat. So, those are really good ideas. Okay. Anything else? Any questions you folks had about the language, stuff you're learning, things you want to share?
I have a question.
Oh.
I'm wondering if there's a way to say planets in Tlingit, because Nidet Kedushu planets Ade Kukwaha Yachats too.
Oh, or maybe you could say dutine, because dutine also means like they can be seen. That might be another way to say it.
Okay.
That's a good question because I don't know if it would, because the biggest clue is Dísi, and that's the one that has its own name. Is that one?
That's Venus.
Venus. Yeah. So Venus has its own name. So then I do think we can end up with something Dísi, and we just call it a dis. But then I don't know, like Xingitani, which is the contracted form of Xingitani is Shtani. But that seems to be very specific to the earth. And so there was certainly knowledge of stars, the moon, other, at least one other planet got a name. But I do think that's an exercise we should engage in, is naming the planets so that we can talk about them. And some of them have names from just like, don't Saturn and Jupiter like come from Greek or something?
Greek and Roman myth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Pliny the Elder, like 2,000 years ago, was like talking about them all the time and stuff.
I wonder if there were names for them in Tlingit, but they were lost.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly possible. And we're running into this with place names and other things where we're like, we're just going to have to cook up a name for some of these things. And that's just how it's going to go. And sometimes we get into that where it's like, I'm sure there was a name for this. My latest thing that I'm wondering, and I'll ask a speaker next time I talk to one, is sometimes there's like was either the mainland or the large island, and then there's a little island, and sometimes when the tide goes down, there's a little path that connects them, but that you can only walk it on a low tide. There's got to be some kind of name for that. And then I was thinking of this kind of thing today, which was like, oh, well, maybe we call it like ḥintak'deyi or something, because sometimes it's exposed like tashui means it's the tide flats, but it's not the muddy tide flats. It means like think of for those of you who know the area of ʻAʻk, when you're driving past where if you're driving, let's say from the airport area, and then you head towards downtown, you're going to pass the airport, and then you're going to pass this little set of houses, and then there's going to be this kind of opening, including a place people like to go and walk their dogs and hunt ducks and stuff. That place has grass that's pretty tall, but on certain tides and certain times of the moon cycles and the months, it gets completely buried in like underwater, totally underwater. And so there's that area is generally called dashooch, which is like it's an area that, and this we need to know that because there's certain things like ʼakaduneek and ʼxusteeyí, which are really good in those areas. You want to be able to go pick them when you've got the right kind of tides. So maybe there's, and as we sort of, for those, we have to compare, like, how are these other things named? And maybe we could find a name for them. Like, there's certain things that I just wonder, or like when a eagle holds its wings out to dry or something. I'm like, oh, there's got to be some way to talk about that, right? And so when it comes to planets, like, and this might require us to analyze, because the biggest clue we get about the moon, the moon around the Earth, is that it's called Ḳéex. It has a name, but then they'll say you this, and so maybe the dis is just ends up being the default for a planetary type of body, which a moon is. But I understand that a moon goes around a planet, and so we might need to differentiate those. Like, well, but they gave, and the other thing too, and one of the things that will always challenge us in this is that Tlingit was forbidden while other languages weren't. So we didn't get to be part of this conversation. And like, but we can also look at what does Hawaiian do, because Hawaiian is very connected to their astronomy programs, and they're naming galaxies and stuff in Hawaiian. And so it's very cool. One.
Last year, for our archaeology project, I listened to some of those old recordings from Ḳéex. And I think in the Susie James one, talking about Kagwantan history, they were talking about this fort, Ḥaknu'u, dry fort near Great Glacier Bay. They said it had 3 names across its history. One when it was like firmly attached to the mainland when the tide was pretty low. One when the water had been raised a bit, and then one kind of afterward, after Ḥuna had been established. But the one in between, when it was kind of attached through that kind of temporary tidal bridge that you're talking about, was just called T'aawáḳ, just sand fort. But I don't know, that might be a direction to take it, kind of like relation to sand, maybe sand path or something like that.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, because Hook is a sandbar, but it's also a sandy beach, and so interesting. Okay, we will have the planetary conversation as well. I think it's a really good one to think about and talk about.
It might be easy enough to describe them, like Saturn would be, ring around the disk. Neptune would be the big one. Pluto would be the small one. I don't know how we describe it, but
yeah, like Jupiter and like, and that's the thing too, is maybe we get some people together and we look at pictures of them and
Jupiter could be the gassy one.
Yeah. Right. It's like steam or something. Yeah. Okay. Good question. Good thoughts. So we'll brainstorm and we'll figure out a time and place to come up with some answers. Okay. Good sheesh. So on the syllabus, you had some sentences to translate. Some of them do have some little typos here and there. And so I do believe I fixed them in this document. So what I'd like us to do in terms of like taken a dive into this is if I can get someone to just read the whole thing. You don't have to translate it. I just need a reader to read this whole thing.
Should I read it?
Yes, go ahead.
Adashkanikiyan akjint has washi yatee has yaka achet has du lik has skachnige gunashish ʼatudli ʼátk has city has du ʼtaawációwu ye a xusteeyí ʼkitein has ʼawu káxkawu.
But it's cheesh. And just that we all know, does anybody know Káxkawu, what his other name would be?
Cyril George.
Anybody know what clan?
Isn't it something like? Isn't it?
Is it jitooné?
Oh, gonna cheesh.
But isn't the other name like something like T'aawáḳ or something like that?
Tao Chun was one of Walter Sobolov's names. When I did, I should have said his. I didn't know if I want to say his English name. I guess that's what I should have said. His government name. He did have another name, which was the name of the arch at Basket Bay, which is escaping me right now. Ḳáex or something like that. Ḳáex was his commonly known as name. This was Cyril George. So we have this whole thing, which we're going to come back to. But I thought what I'd do is kind of isolate the verbs, and then we'll just see how this goes. We're going to try a little exercise where we have some stuff in so like identifying is there stuff in the preverb? Is there an object? And so which of these do we need to fill in? And so what we'll do is we'll just put the little sort of particles in there, and then down here we might name them. We'll see, we might end up getting really squished. I haven't tried it this way before, but I thought we would today. So thinking of this, akjint has uwashi. So this is whole verb. So this is the verb phrase, and then within the verb phrase, there's a verb. What things is there anything in the preverb?
Akjint.
And hus. Oh, well, hus is, I guess, object. Well, it's kind of both.
It is an object modifier that is in the preverb, yes. Okay. Is there an object here?
If there is, it's a no. Probably not.
Are there any thematic prefixes here?
Okay.
Are there any conjugation prefixes here?
Perfective.
Ooh.
Is there a subject marker here?
And if there is, it's a no.
Anybody know what the classifier would be?
I believe that's a 0 classifier.
It is. And how would we write it?
Is it a yeah?
It's a 0 group, but it is a yeah. Yep. And if I were to write the stem just as like what's going on, I'm going to write V. I'm going to put V's in there with tone marks or not. What would we call this? And so the words that we would use to describe a stem: short and high, long and high, long and low.
Long and high.
Long and high.
Yeah, away. And so I'm not sure if there's an object on here. I would expect there to be one, but there might be something going on because, and the other thing is I might have to just listen to it and see if it's not that, because that's what it should be, I think. And so I will go listen to it and double check. But I think for our exercise here, let me just adjust this to say that's how I would expect it to be. Maybe I made a mistake. So with all this information, what is the verb mode here?
It's perfective.
It's perfect. How do we know that?
Just got the perfective conjugation marker.
It has perfective conjugation and a plus I classifier. So that means it should be a positive perfective. But if it's a positive perfective, this also can tell us something. What can this tell us if this is a perfective?
Well, the ʼaawáxʼ is subject and object in the verb.
Yeah, so there's that. And so then if that's the case, then we could change this to an A, which we will. And like I said, I'll go back and listen to it. So this is a third person, that's a third person. If this is all the information, I could tell you that I would expect it to be a zero classifier verb. I can tell that. You won't always be able to tell. And then how would we translate this?
They touched my hand.
What about the hus part?
They, plural. Oh, they all.
And, this is how I am choosing to deal with singular and plural, which I know is complicated, but I'm saying hus, I'm saying they and they all. Them alls gets very awkward for me, but I'm not sure how else to do it. Okay, any questions about that one? I'm going to say I don't think it has a Y on there too. So I'm fixing these as we go along, which I should have done a long time ago. If this is has ʼaqa'áxet, anyone want to volunteer to tell us all the components that might be in here? We'll go one person at a time this time. Someone think they could tell us everything that's in there? Or should we do it all together again? Okay, is there anything in the preverb?
Us.
Is there an object? Is there a thematic prefix?
Like,
Is there a conjugation prefix?
There's ka, is that the hortative mode?
Yes. And so because there's qa, and because it's in a hortative pattern, I think it's a sub mode of the hortative. There must be something else there too, right? So if there are, I will tell you there are two conjugation prefixes here. Can you tell me what they are and what order they should go in?
Well, one of them is obviously ka.
One of them is qa.
Is it ka or horizontal surface or on?
We're talking conjugate, like not, that would be thematic. There's no thematic prefix. There are two conjugation prefixes, which is an unfair thing to say, because if there's not very much here. right? There's two syllables. And so we're gonna see like there's a subject, I'll tell you that. That's a 0. There's a classifier. What would the classifier be?
0.
Does anybody know? Okay, so this is not a hortative, but it's built off of a hortative. Does anybody know what we call this verb mode?
Purposive.
Purposive, which means it's the so it could happen mode. Does anybody know how to say this in the perfective? Okay, so when we get to the stem, it's ʼatudli.átk. So the perfective of this would be ʼaawáḳ. Well, if we didn't, you could put a has on there if you want to. Like that, it doesn't affect the verb itself. This is another 0. And so it's a purposive, and I want to let you know that because there is a 0 conjugation that's activated. It's there. I don't know. Like it's just good to note it so that you know in a hortative you have to have the conjugation prefix of the verb activated. And what is the stem? Oops.
Ah.
Long.
And there's no place for the suffix.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there isn't. Thank you. Let me add that. And what is the suffix?
He.
Do we know how to translate this one? T'aawáḳ.
I was having trouble with the root before, but now I know because that's the root for to listen or understand. So I'm going to say they all touched my hand so I could understand them. Something like that.
Well, this one isn't necessarily, we're sort of isolating these verbs. And so they could hear it.
I'm sorry, except the subject and the object there is like.
Yeah, it's okay. So the object is the thing they're listening to. And then, or whatever the thing that it's going to be revealed to us. And then when we come back and look at the whole phrase, like the whole quote, like all these pieces will fit together pretty well. But then we're just sort of isolating them just to see how they work. Because we can build perfective verbs. We can say ʼaawáḳ. Then we can say ʼakaduneek. Then we say, oh, this is also a 0. Could I say ʼakaduneek? Yeah, you can say that. So they could touch.
I'm looking at the purposive building block, and it just has a T for the suffix.
Yeah, sorry, it is a T, but it will be an IT if that ends like, because if you said ʼakaduneek, it's too difficult to say that. And so there will be other times too, like if it was she, it would be YIT. So I guess I should note that somehow. Just know it's a T, but sometimes Tlingit needs to add some space. And it's going to do that with either the letter I or the letter, just like the relational suffix. It's an I, but sometimes it'll be a U. It's going to follow all those same rules. But it would be yit here. It's going to be it here.
So it's a T, but it has to be its own. No, it doesn't have to be its own syllable necessarily.
It's a T, but sometimes it just needs some separation. I'll have to sort of do a little bit of research on it to get you a better answer.
So,
That's
Wanaxawe we stem VV. Why isn't that underlined X considered a consonant?
all I'm noting here is the vowel.
Oh,
When I
Okay.
say stem, this is not the root.
Okay.
I'm just looking
Oh.
at stem variation. I want us to practice that. Long, low, long, high. It helps us just to see what there are patterns in all of this stuff. And I just want us to keep seeing these patterns. So when we put them together in a predictive way, because the whole idea of doing this is so that you know how to put it together. It's very like one piece at a time. I get it, but yeah. Sheesh. Okay. Is there a preverb?
Is it alle achtergrond laat zien niet?
Okay. Oh,
Plus hus.
yeah. Sheesh. No, okay, fine. Is there an object?
I think this time I'd say no.
How
So, I
would
mean, kind of, because ʼatudli.átk is kind of the object.
if I wanted to say, I could change this phrase and say, you are my courage. Oops, I just translated it, sorry. And how I would do that is that. And if you said, I am your courage, it would look like that. The sati verb does have an object. Like just getting to know this verb, because you could say Norwegian ʼatudli, ʼakaduneek isiti. Like once we recognize what kind of pronoun that is, like, okay, I know how to turn that wheel. So this does have a 0. Thematic. Conjugation.
Take.
Subject.
Like,
Classifier.
see.
S plus I.
Fun.
Why is it ʼatudlitóow hasiti rather than ʼatudlitóow hasiti? Is the two just like always part of the verb?
Well, it comes like, so these are 2 different nouns. So one noun, let's see. Okay. These are 2 different nouns. Anybody know what these 2 nouns are?
Strength and courage.
That's right. So he's not saying they're my strength.
Okay. I thought it meant strength or courage depending on context. I didn't realize that they were 2
It's all about the tuwu. Once you put tuwu in front of it, now it's courage.
All right, that makes sense. Sheesh.
Okay. And what is
So it's
this?
like inner strength.
Exactly. Or like, yeah, like thought strength, or it like comes down to this tuwu: consciousness, spirit, feelings, intentions, desires, thoughts. What is the stem here? Short and high, long and low, long and high.
Long and low?
Long and low. What is the mode?
Imperfective.
Imperfective. Yeah.
Sometimes you might also say it's a state imperfective, because only state imperfectives are the only ones that can have nothing in this conjugation, and a plus I classifier. Okay. And how do we translate this?
Like courage, they are.
Those plurals, those guyses, those peoples are my courage. Okay. As to ʼatudli.átk, yeah. Gotta add something here. Can't remember what color my post-verb thing was. Preverb?
Isn't there also a suffix on this one?
Yes, thank you. Very good catch. I'm going to, there is no thematic and there is no conjugate. Well, I guess we'll leave them. Everything's pretty small here. Good call.
So, ʼatudli for the preverb.
Yeah, away. Is there, this one is confusing to me. I believe this verb, I guess it has a subject, but the subject will be treated like will be interpreted as an object. So for example, if you said, ʼatudli.átk, they all want me or like me. I will give you that one because it's unusual. This falls into the exception category. Sometimes Tlingit will say, yeah, there's an object there, but it's actually the subject. And every now and then there's a subject there, but that's actually the object. It's very interesting. Like sometimes you get these unusual patterns where the hastu, that whatever's coming before the tuwa is the one who wants it or likes it. There is no thematic. There is no conjugation. There is no object in this verb. Classifier.
Sí.
Stem.
Low and high.
Suffix.
Ooh.
Post verb.
Yeah.
So these two things are the main clues on how we interpret what this is saying, I think. Because without them, if we just sort of took those, ʼatudli.átk, that's very common. We like, even though like pulling it apart and identifying all the little parts in there might be kind of new for us. If I asked you, what does this mean? ʼatudli.átk. How do we interpret that?
They
Do
all
they want it?
Yeah, they all want it or they all like it. But what happens when we put that on there?
Is the suffix wu relational?
It is attributive, which means it follows all of the rules of the relational suffix, but it always stays low. And it will pop up if you have yeah and you have a plus I classifier. So if you have a plus I classifier in the verb and you add yeah, you'll have to put this suffix on there. And the yeah thing is the biggest thing that alters the meaning right here. But it doesn't alter it in a huge way. Anybody, what does yeah usually do? It does one of two things.
Makes it a place.
It's the place or
The way.
the way. If it's the way, you would have adé in front of it. Because there's no adé, it is the place. So the place where they all want it. Right. And we're going to see what the it is. It's actually the next verb down. This gets really tricky. And like, it's just so interesting to see the complexity of these speakers. He chose to say it this way, like in the moment too. Like it's amazing to me. Let's do ʼatudli.átk, yeah. The place where they all want it. In terms of the mode here, like this is another state imperfective, but it also has the place part on it. So I'm not sure. We could just say state imperfective with the way added onto. I don't know how to say that, but this part does not affect the way the verb conjugates. It affects the interpretation and the meaning.
This would be adding another verb, but how would you say the place where they all want to be?
Yeah, so you'd say hastu tuwasaguya. And then this shows us that you should this second verb, because this is the verb that follows it, should be in, and we're going to get to this. This is a subordinate perfective. So if you wanted to say that, you would say yeah, us, yeah. The place, and so that's how you would say the place they are, but it's tying it to the other verb. And it gets a little tricky on whether you're going to use a perfective or imperfective for some of them. That verb I've heard as t, but it depends if this is something that truly happened in the past, then you'd say wuti. Okay. Kadeen has ʼatudli.átk. Which I do think. I think this verb generally rejects low. So Kadeen has ʼatudli.átk. Maybe just low high. We'll write it as low high. Is there a preverb?
Kadeen has?
Is there an object?
Ah.
Is there a thematic?
Back.
Is there a conjugation?
Yeah.
Is there a subject?
No.
If you have a as the object, there must be zero as the subject.
There have to be a zero
Yep.
or null.
Yeah. What's the classifier? It's not going to be the way it looks right there.
Sa.
Yeah. Why does it change to just the letter S?
Too many vowels?
Too many pieces.
There are lots of pieces, but here it is. Because if you'd said to the place, that's what it would look like if it was the first person. So it would be restored. the reason for it is if we look at the classifier, this is where maybe this table is helpful. If we go left, is there anything between the perfective marker and sa? Because if there isn't, it's going to knock that letter A out of there. That's what doesn't. The irialis would do the same thing. So that's why it has to be a wuss. It has to be that. And I do think our stem is this. And I do think we have a suffix, which is. So what is? So I think I told you, this is what we call subordinate perfective. This subordinate part means there's this little suffix which is tying it to another verb. It should not exist on its own. I've seen it before where it does. But in this case, ķeex T'aawáḳ. And I think in terms of this, hasdu tuwasagu ķeex T'aawáḳ, the place that they want where they would know well.
Could you repeat what you said about the y and the knocking the vowel out of the classifier?
Yes. And let me pull up a little I got a chart for this, which I'll put this chart up on its own, but let me find it first. So this is under.
And I'm assuming it only knocks the vowel out if it's a minus I, because otherwise you have to have the I.
Yeah, so the only Southern Tlingit are the only ones who can drop the I. And so we are speaking non-Southern Tlingit. We cannot drop the I. So, and this only is the case for sa, sha, and sha. Only those three classifiers. So this is a S, L, or SH in the minus I minus D mode. So if the classifier should usually be sa, sha, or sha, if the thing immediately before it is any of these things, it will knock the vowel out of there. So for example, this would be a. So an example of that. So let me see if I can duplicate this. That's what I'll do. Duplicate this. And I'll show you folks some examples, okay? So let's do an example of each one of these. So if I were to say, I am eating it, how would I say I am eating it? Oh, wait, no, sorry. That's not what I want to do. Okay, I'll just give it. So ḥaśatin is I am keeping an eye on it. I'm watching it. I'm an active watcher, or maybe I am like babysitting or something like that, right? So ḥaśatin is I am watching it. And this would be ishatin, but when we switch to the third person, it goes ashtin. Because this is in direct contact with sha. And so it's like, get out of here. So it kicks that vowel out. The irialis does as well, right? And so you could say ḥaśatin, or you could say, I'm trying to think of when it only has the irialis. Well, I guess you'd say ḥusteeyí. They're not cooking it, which would probably be a double O. So this is an irialis And so I would say, I'm not cooking it. I think it's that way, actually. And then a na. So you could say, ausaku. Does anybody know the progressive form of this? They are getting to know it.
Yeah, on a screen.
So that you have na right before it, which means that a gets knocked out of sa. Let's see.
Well, but it would be a plus I, wouldn't it?
What's that?
Wouldn't it? Yeah, unless well, you said
It,
it would get knocked out, but wouldn't it be plus I? It's plus I in ausaku.
No, because this is the perfective. We went from the perfective to the progressive. So for this verb, all of your progressives, they always have to be minus I because
Okay.
it hasn't happened. So usually what the plus I says is like, oh yeah, it did actually become that way or happen. Or unless it's a potential, you could use it in the potential. So same with qa. So like an example would be you say qashat, and this is the qa. So this would be, sha in other cases. And so, but this is what causes it the sha to get knocked, the a to get knocked out of there. The perfective marker would do the same thing. So we can actually add to this one and say, oh, and also t'aawáḳ, right? And then daqa would do it as well. I guess I don't think I'm gonna be able to think of an example. I guess daqascha, they're eating them, they're eating each of them. And then d has its own set of rules. But this is something that does happen, is if when you have those, and so just sa, sha, and sha, there are cases, and usually we just sort of memorize these patterns. But one of the things that we're trying to do is continue to memorize this pattern. Say, oh, it's ʼatudli.átk, ʼx'awasteen. Like this is just going to be the pattern. But what is going on under the hood is you do have sa, but that letter A is getting deleted. So that they would know it well. So then we've got this stuff. So we've got, they all touched my hand so they could hear it. They all are my courage, the place where they all wanted, that they would know it well. So now when we come back up here, oh, so that they can hear. Yeah, it's right there. So now there's a lot we can do with this interpretation, right? There's so much stuff we can do. But just based on everything we just looked at, if someone asked you, how could you translate that for me? How would you do it?
I can try. Our grandchildren, they touched my hand so they could hear the stories of their grandparents. Thank you. They are my courage. Place where they want it, our culture, but they know it well.
Okay. Sheesh. And so there's a lot of layers to this stuff, and there's a lot in the grammar and there could be like little things like I'll go back and listen to it and sort of double check. But just like to see how they're putting this stuff together. Which brings us to this next one. It's another big conceptual one. Can I get someone to read this one?
Pataya.
Oh,
Aku ayehan kauduanik achlis kuch. Ayanach yayikuchu yakwedeyi ika ayaudatiyit. Tesnase yakgikuch in ayach gugwashin iyagu. Aga awe yechat dayaka. Atanach yan yikuchu wasa ye ikwanech. Ye ayayati ya atk ahin wush guanade.
geez. So this first verb, yechan kaduneek. Do we have preverb? What is, and there might be one, there's one here that I'm going to ask us to pull apart. So when we're done, we should have probably 3 words in this spot.
Yechan.
And there's one of these that we could pull apart. Just this one. If I said, let's pull this is a contraction. Anybody know what this is a contraction of?
Is it achin?
Is there an object there?
No.
If I change this, so this
I feel like it might be a 0.
it is a 0. And we know and these are things where like we just kind of got to remember these verb themes. Like there's learning Tlingit, it does, like, I know this is a very like pulling it apart, slow process, but I want us just to continue to see, like, I need to know that theme. And I know that I would say Khan Akawanik. So I know that there's an object there because in the third person it will pop up. Is there a thematic prefix?
Ka.
Is there a conjugation in there?
Do.
What's the subject?
Do.
Classify.
Yeah.
Them. Short and high, long and high, long and low.
Allow.
What is the verb mode?
It's perfected.
Do we know how to translate this one?
They told it to me.
We do have the duh.
Told it to each other.
Well, that would be, you'd have Wooch in, then you'd
It
have
was-
like ʼakaduneek or something.
It was told to me.
Yes. The yay in front of it, I would say like something like as so. And so the yay is sort of setting us up to like hear what's coming. And so like as far as like seeing the grammar that's going on here, like I guess before we go forward, let me just do a check. Is everybody okay? How's everybody doing? Questions, thoughts about this process? Like I just want to make sure it's a lot. Like it's a little over an hour to go through like 5 or 6 sentences, right? But so it's a slow crawl through this. But then we'll do some other stuff next week. That's a different pace. But the idea here is just to like see this stuff in action. Like look at these sentences. Look at this thing that they're telling us, right? And just sort of seeing what those parts are so that we can put them together ourselves afterwards. Anya nachtla.
Ganashish. My question, I had a question about how you marked the classifier on that last one. You had the ya instead of a 0. Is that just because that's how it shows up in this verb?
Well, I'm not marking the group because
Okay.
this is the plus I of,
Okay.
and so if you could gloss it, like a detailed gloss of it would probably look like CL period, and then I'd go a parenthesis, and this is where I would say, is it plus D? No, so I don't write anything. It's a 0 classifier. Okay, I need to mark the group, comma, plus I. So that is how I like to sort of gloss a classifier so I can note what group it's in. But here I'm just identifying it. I'm saying, oh yeah, it's yeah. And hopefully like there are 16 classifiers, but then once I see, I was like, yeah, I know it. So if they didn't tell me, it should switch back to 0.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Thoughts, questions? Okay. Let's take a look. I'm going to take a look at something so I could see this ḳusteeyí verb, see if I can find. Okay, this is another one. I do want to go take a listen to it, but I'm going to make a decision here, which is I'm going to cut it down to just yikuchu. And so I don't know why the ya would be there. And I want to listen to it to make sure it is there. And so to simplify it, we're going to cut it down. I'm going to cut that potential thematic prefix off. I'm not trying to alter the words of, oh, T'aawáḳ. What's that do a ʻakaduneek inachisikuga?
Austin Hammond.
T'aawáḳ.
Adi. Kovli.
Ah, yeah, the one. That's my ancestor. The namesake of T'aawáḳ before this T'aawáḳ was ʼakaduneek. John T'aawáḳ. Okay. So do we have a preverb?
Ayanach.
This is a motion verb for well, this type of motion verb does not have a subject. So there's some that we should, as we do these exercises, we should say, okay, like siti and yatee and those ones don't have subjects. Like yanagut and yanakukh and those ones, yanashik, those don't have objects. So I'll just say, no, there's nothing there. I took the potential thematic off, just said, I don't want to do the super. We're already deep diving. We don't need to go all the way to the halibut hole. So, is there a conjugation prefix in here?
No.
There is this, but I'm actually probably going to say that there's both of these. And I'll tell you why in a second. I'll go back up and maybe make an adjustment to another one. Is there what's the subject? There is a subject, I'll tell you that. And it's not a 0. I and ye are the only ones that can turn this perfective marker into a Y. Classifier?
No.
What is the stem?
Long and short.
Long and
Long and low.
long and low. Yeah,
Long and low. Sorry.
yeah, no problem. There is a suffix. Let me grab that. What is the suffix?
Ooh.
Do we know what mode this is? We have seen it before. It is the reason why I would say you could put both the irrealis and the conjugate or the perfective marker in there.
Oh, I see. This is just it.
Perfective, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, so we need another word right before it.
Repetitive?
Subordinate.
It is subordinate. So what the subordinate means is that it is subordinate. It is tied to another verb. That's all that the subordinate, like we could say relational if we want to, like just in terms of like the words we're using to talk about these. This is just saying, oh, this is in that mode where it needs to be tied, it's tied to another verb. That's why the suffix is here, and that's why the classifier is 0.
And the underline X is because you can't have the oo and the next to each other, correct?
Which one? This one?
Yeah, that one's there because you can't have the double O's and the U.
No, you would have a W there if you needed to separate them. So like if it's there because the verb root is ḳuhteeyí, to go by car or boat. Because if you did have ḳu, you would have ḳuww.
Okay.
Yep. So the subordinate, like coming back to the subordinate perfective, I would say it could be if, or it could be that, or it could be when. Those are kind of, I think, your two options. Then you come back and look at what kind of sentences are being tied together. And I do think that tells you. And what does the nach part here do?
It's when you're going through it.
Directional.
It is directional. Tunach would be usually going through it. But what is like, so because tunach, there's the inside and through or along. But through or along what here? What's right before it? The yah part.
It's the face of it, isn't it?
It is the face. So when you go along the face and think it, so if I said ayanach yikuch, what I'm saying is you went past it. This is how you say to go. And it doesn't, it's just like it's very similar to English. It doesn't mean like you missed it, but it could, because you say ayanach yikuch, you went past it or by it or in front of it, is basically what it's saying. But I would say that when you go past it. And it could be car or boat. I'll give you the answer here. By boat.
Just one other question, Ḳusteeyí. That subordinate perfective, is that always negative perfective or not?
It can be, like, as I'm doing this with other things, it can be a negative imperfective. And then what's really interesting to me, though, is with the negative imperfective, sometimes that irrealis is optional. Like, I definitely hear speakers say something like, they could say, yatee, yatee, and it's just t. That's the whole verb. But I've also heard them say, yatee, uti, where the irrealis is on there. But it could also be a future too. And so, but in the perfective, it seems to always want to go negative. That's what it seems to me. And so you got to bear with me because a lot of this stuff I'm just like, as the more I look at it, I'm just really trying to like piece it together so I could teach it to people. But then sometimes I'm like, this is how it is. And this working with Tlingit, it's just like I'm like, yeah, there's never anything outside that door. And then I'm going to open that door and there's going to be something there. Right. And that's just how Tlingit goes, is you will find the rules, but then you'll find like there's a few exceptions to this. Okay. Well, we're gonna get to yatee. Anybody know what yatee is?
This is just a wild guess, but is it like a canal maybe?
Uh, Not really, but you're not far, but it's not quite. Do you see like there's three parts to it?
It's a boat, like to a boat.
There's a boat. Now what would the other two parts be?
The path and then the possessive marker?
Yeah. So what would a boat path be?
The channel?
Well,
Stream?
seat has its own word. There's
Yatee.
a whole bunch of these. Okay, when long time ago, everybody knew where these things were.
Portage.
Harbor?
Yes, I would say yes, but there is a specific word for that as well. So yatee is a place where you could get your boat into or out of the water. So it could be that would be a good word for like a boat launch. But a long time ago, it was saying like this is a place, and we'll see what this quote is getting to as well, because it's tied to some other bigger things. But it's a place. It's a. I guess we usually translate this as a boat path. I don't know. I think I got to go in and look. I feel like this is something in the place names book. It's almost always translated as canoe trail. But really, it's all about a place where you can get your boat in and out of the water because you needed to know where the yatee was. So there's in the concepts that he is talking about here, which we're gonna pull this whole thing apart. It does take us a while because these are big pieces of language from big people. But a long time ago, you always knew where two things were: ʼqusteeyí, which is also called Dísi, and yatee. So you're traveling always by canoe. And if the water got rough, you would have to find ʼqusteeyí. You always knew where those ones were. And what that means is a safe harbor is what we call a adátx'i. And so we know all these places on the land where we say, okay, if the water's rough, you go in here and it's usually not as rough. But if the water's rough there too, because sometimes that water just shifts, then that means you got to be able to get your boat out of the water. And that's what's yatee. And usually like if you look at the place names map and really study this stuff, there was usually several of these by every village. And that's the places where they regularly launched their canoes and kept them near. They often kept them near that place as well. Ayanach ya yikuchu yatee, ika ayaudatii. So we do have like we have double subordinates going on here, which we'll see. I don't know if you guys want to do one more. I guess we got to get to the comma. Yeah, portage, but like portage is interesting because you would usually just say goon. So like, but I know we're looking for the right word for it.
On the East Coast, sometimes we say landing. There's a place called Sneeden's Landing, where it's the one place you can land on the west bank of the Hudson River if you're going to visit somebody on that bank.
Exactly, because yatee was, I think, about two things. One is the beach area not rocky and not going to wreck your boat. Two, can you get your boat up and out of the beach area? That for me was the two things that made yatee. Yeah, so I do like that. That's a good interpretation.
In Haidagwai, you could see where the rocks had been cleared to make them.
Yeah, because they would make them like gigantic, huge rocks. Like that's tough people, but like Anchkalsu, there's a yatee there. And that's the place where a lot of people like to go in and out of the water for dipping. Okay. We gotta do the fast version of this preverb.
Ka.
I don't see it anymore.
Oh, am I not?
I see it.
Okay.
I and ka. Okay, this has okay. When we come back next week, I'll have an answer for this. Yeah, it's something that transporting by boat probably. Okay, ika. I'm gonna give you the answer to this one, and I also on the syllabus version, I think I missed this. There is a thematic here. So I'm just going to give you that because it's too confusing whether it's an object or not. It is not. Oh, there's another thematic there. Anybody know what it is?
Yeah.
Is there conjugation stuff in there?
Yeah.
This verb has no subject. What is the classifier?
Oh.
Stem?
Long.
Suffix.
Yeah.
Mode. Oh, yeah, this should help too. I do believe that is also there. We look at this exact same pattern. Minus
subordinate perfective.
There you go. My hope is just we keep doing this and we will start to just see them. We'll see them like, oh, it has all those things when I pulled that apart. Does anybody know this verb and know how to interpret it?
It's wind.
What's the perfect?
Oh,
like the positive perfective. Anybody know how to say this?
Ayoditi.
We know what that means now, right?
It's like it's windy on you or something.
Yeah, stormy, windy. And now we gotta get to this other. I gotta leave you in suspense. Here comes the ʼqit'yáx. What are we gonna say? ʼqit'yáx. It's just hanging on a cliff. I don't know how you're supposed to, because then you try to translate stuff. You're like, well, how's it hanging? Is it like a bundle of things? Is it a long string thing? Is it a person? We'll just say it's a cliffhanger. Yeah, canoe runs. I think, yeah, that's right. Canoe runs, right? Because it's the place where you would bring it up and down. But also, more than that, we knew where those places were, even that there's no village there. Like I'm sure if you talk to people long time ago, they would know everywhere they went regularly. They would know all those places where you got to get off the water sometimes because sometimes it could turn really fast between the tides and the weather. Atling gonna cheese to cut you han. Konach yatee jineiyí. Konach gadlan o eha yukatangi. Yeah, achtuasagu ya hatlagu konki yan hastu yach ʼakaduneek. Achwe yata ada. So we pull that accordion. Ḥusteeyí. What do you call ḥusteeyí? Kook, I think, is what George Davis named the accordion. I met one of his nephews today. Anyways, okay, getting distracted. But we pull this stuff apart and we look at it so that we can see, like, I want us to be very good at identifying these things, seeing the parts that are in them. Because there might come a time pretty soon where I'll say, put it in that mode. Put these things together. And when someone starts saying, oh yeah, so if you drive past Super Bear, you're gonna see this thing or whatever. There's all kinds of stuff that we can figure out how to do because of this. So ḳusteeyí. I will post this document we're just looking at in a PDF version so you could see it frozen as it is, in a Pages version in case you have a Mac, and in a Word version in case you don't. And that way you'll have these tables with you and you can sort of mess around with them and start figuring out all these verbs. And so do these verbs. Next week, we'll focus on a little bit more language production. And we'll start talking about how we can shift our Monday classes to trying to push ourselves to be conversational, which I know is a big goal and a big task for all of us. And then for the next weekend, your assignment is going to be to produce some language. So I would like you to try and tease out as many of these verbs as you can. If you can't get them all, it's totally fine. But you do have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, lots of time. As someone told me before class started, I'm sure you don't have anything you do in between these classes. Just rock out and do verb stuff. But no pressure, as always. ḳusteeyí.
Konstantin.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Sheesh.
Yaggin.
Sheesh.
Cheese.